Into the Gray. It sounds like the name of a bad horror movie, but is this where Star Wars is heading? Is the future of our favorite franchise going to be less a battle between the darkness and light, good and evil, and more of a struggle within the gray that exists between the two? And I'm not just talking about the Force and how it will be used or even viewed in the future. I also mean the general feel of the universe, that there will be less of a stark contrast between future heroes and villains, that Star Wars will take on a more Game of Thrones feel, if you will. And even if you totally hate this idea, you have to admit it's not a terrible one, because when you really think about it, there are only so many different ways that you can pit good guys versus bad guys before it gets, well, old and tired. And yes, I realize that if you look beyond the outer layers, Star Wars is already far from just the external battle of good versus evil, but the internal one waged by individuals like Anakin Skywalker. Let me first say that I like the prequels. I really do, because the story George Lucas was trying to tell was a good one, he just failed to execute to show it. I don't want to get too into this here and would rather leave it for a future topic because I could spend a lot of time on this, but what the prequels failed to do was to clearly show that the Jedi failed because of their inability to adapt. They had a code and they stuck with it till the end, and it cost them everything. In a lot of ways, the prequels have beautifully set up this shift to the gray that Star Wars has seemingly taken because we got to see that the Jedi way failed, flat out, it was wrong. And as I've said before, I think Luke has gone looking for the first Jedi Temple because he realizes the prequel era Jedi were wrong and he wants to see how it was done, well, back in the day. The other great failing of the prequels, in my opinion, was not generating enough sympathy for Anakin Skywalker, or maybe not even generating any at all. In other words, most people didn't like him or care that he was going to become Vader. We spent 3 movies waiting for this whiny guy to turn so that he could start hunting and purging the remnants of the Jedi Order, not becoming invested in his story and his struggle. Just imagine how much more powerful that scene would be at the end of Return of the Jedi if we had fallen in love with this character of Anakin Skywalker during the prequels. To see him overcome the dark that he'd so tragically lost to in the first 3 movies of the saga, and to save his son from the one who had caused it in the first place and now wants to recruit him. What if we had spent the prequels dreading the fact that this character that had grown on us so much was going to fall and ruin it all for himself? And imagine if we completely bought into the love between Anakin and Padme, if it had just felt a bit more natural and we really wanted it to work for these two, even though we knew it was going to have to end tragically. And just imagine how differently we'd view Anakin if we'd been shown just how much Palpatine was manipulating him all along. How it could have been. At the core, the prequels were all about the internal struggle of one man, Anakin Skywalker, and how the choices he would make would impact the entire galaxy, and how his relationship with 3 people, Padme, Obi-Wan, and Palpatine, led him to those eventual choices. The problem with the prequels is they didn't show that enough. So in a way, Star Wars is not moving to a grayer tone, but rather bringing what has always been at the core more to the forefront. But this is not the only voyage into the gray Star Wars seems to be making. It is also challenging our well-established notions on who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and what they're all about. I look no further than Rogue One and how it started to tarnish the once squeaky clean reputation of the rebellion. In it we see one of our heroes, Cassian Andor, set the tone very early in the movie when he shoots an informant in the back rather than let him fall into the hands of the Empire. And yes, this may have been the right choice, you could argue, since the Empire would have tortured him, learned valuable information from him, and then either killed him or locked him away forever, but still, we didn't see anything like this out of the rebellion in the original trilogy. And then, later in the movie, Cassian's given the order to assassinate Galen Erso, who has had a large hand in the creation of the Death Star, or at least the laser part of it, instead of attempting to rescue him. We also see in the book Battlefront Twilight Company that life in the rebellion is not all it's cracked up to be, and not everyone is there to fight simply for the good cause. Some have nowhere else to go, others are simply there for the fight itself. Either way, it shows us a darker, grittier side of the rebellion than we've ever imagined, and it is worth a read just for the new perspective it begins to shine on the good guys. Another long-standing idea that we've had challenged lately is that all Imperials are simply bad guys, and the book Lost Stars is a great example of this. In it we see 2 young people join the Empire because they simply believe and buy into the lies and propaganda, which I'm sure plenty of people throughout the galaxy do. The characters in this book believe that the Empire is a just and noble organization that is attempting to bring peace and stability to the galaxy in the wake of the Clone Wars. And if you're not personally a witness to some of the atrocities of the Empire, and you buy into everything you hear on the nightly Hollow News, right of course by the Empire, why wouldn't you believe them? Why wouldn't you believe that the Jedi had once been an enemy of the Republic, trying to take it over from within, and that Palpatine was a hero who stopped them? What Lost Stars does so great, other than just being a good story, is give you the common person's view of the galaxy. It shows you how and why people would sign up to be a part of the Empire, not having any clue what they really represent, and why when you do start to see the horrors of the Empire, it's so hard to believe it or to get yourself out. The book even shows us the destruction of Alderaan and how an Imperial from the planet reacted to it, and why even he believed the Empire was justified to destroy his homeworld. The show Rebels has been another great example of how the Empire is not entirely made up of bad guys, though it hasn't been quite so overt about it. We get an episode where we see Wedge and Hobby want to defect the rebellion because, like our characters in Lost Stars, they likely signed up not realizing just how bad the Empire is, and once they did, they wanted to get out. And I'm sure there are a great many of Imperials who also had no idea what they were signing up for, but unlike Wedge and Hobby and some others who do defect, they don't have the courage or maybe the means or know how to do it. It's not like you can just easily walk out the proverbial front door of the Empire and find the rebellion. You need contacts, like a Fulcrum agent, which we have learned Agent Callus has become, which is another example that the Empire is not simply evil, since even one of its most seemingly loyal members can have a change of heart and start to do the right thing. Rebels has also brought us 3 other characters that have changed well-established concepts and started to bring us closer to a gray Star Wars. The first is Ahsoka Tano, who many mistakenly call a Gray Jedi, and I say mistakenly because she doesn't fit either of the 2 definitions of a Gray Jedi, at least from the old expanded universe. Gray Jedi are either Jedi who have distanced themselves from the core beliefs of the Order, like a Qui-Gon Jinn for example, one who doesn't play by all the rules but is still very much a Jedi, or a Gray Jedi is someone who walks between the dark and the light and uses both. Now, Ahsoka has proclaimed many times that she is no longer a Jedi, and she isn't because she was kicked out of the Order and turned down their offer to come back when they realized they had kicked her out unjustly. So she's not a Gray Jedi in that respect. We've also seen no sign of her using anything but the light side of the Force, and I think her pure white lightsabers are a good indication that she is still a purely light side Force user, which means she's not a Gray Jedi in the respect that she walks the line between the dark and the light. So what is she exactly? Much like one of our other 3 game-changing characters, she's just a light side user, much like a Jedi but not one in name. Just like Maul is a dark side user, though he's not a Sith. In fact, he's a dark side user who wants to destroy the Sith, another new and very cool concept added to Star Wars. And if what Pablo Hidalgo said is true, there were no Sith in The Force Awakens, so that means Snoke and Kylo Ren are something new and different too. And all this makes sense because with the introduction of things like the Church of the Force, which Lor San Tekka is a part of, and the Guardians of the Whills, which Baze and Chirrut are a part of, we're starting to see that the Force is not just a Jedi and Sith thing, but something used, known, and worshipped by all sorts of people in all sorts of ways throughout the galaxy, which only makes sense when you consider the Force is what binds the galaxy together, and that every living being is a part of it. The last and biggest introduction in Rebels has been the Bendu, a true neutral Force user who doesn't wield the dark or the light in any way, but rather seemingly uses the Force itself as a whole. He, of course, is the greatest indication yet that the future of Star Wars is going to incorporate more gray aspects, and I don't think this is a bad thing, especially if they handle it how I mentioned before, by bringing out more of the internal struggle of individuals, because nobody in the real world is pure good or pure evil, so it doesn't make sense that, even in this fantasy world, that people would be pure good or pure evil, that even the greatest hero would have some gray within, and so too would the worst villain. I look at Kylo Ren, a villain that is being pulled on by the light, a totally new and different concept in Star Wars. It does fly in the face of what Yoda said in The Empire Strikes Back about, once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. But this could have just been a warning from Yoda that once you start using the dark side, it is very difficult to pull yourself back and to stop. Or maybe he just said that to Luke because of what had happened to his father, and Luke might be prone to falling to the dark side. Perhaps with proper training, and when used by the right person and for the right reasons, the dark side can be used by primarily light side users like the Jedi. This, I think, is what a lot of people are hoping Luke is learning on that island, that the title of Episode 8, The Last Jedi, refers to the fact that Luke will be the last Jedi of his kind, and that going forward they will not be solely wielders of the light, but rather more protectors of it who can harness their fears and angers when needed to defend themselves or others, to learn how to love and to have attachments without them becoming possible weaknesses that can be exploited. That instead of trying to repress their emotions, they will learn how to control them and not let themselves be ruled by them. And no, I don't think or want Star Wars to go totally gray and go way too far with it, so far that it gives them an excuse to do crazy stuff like let Luke use Force Lightning, for example, something that should be reserved for powerful dark side users only. Nor do I want to see every Force user going like a yo-yo from dark to light and back again over and over. That too would get old really fast and be utterly ridiculous. I also don't want every Force user to be gray so that there aren't really sides anymore. In other words, I don't want this to be the end of the battle of dark versus light. I just want this to be a new way of showing it. In fact, to be honest, I'm not even sure how for or against this gray shift I am. But like it or not, this is the direction I think they're taking Star Wars in. And yes, you may say that this is not how Star Wars should be at all, that it should always be good versus evil, a stark contrast, that there should never be Jedi dipping into the dark side, or that they should never love or have attachments, and so on. But the old ways of the Jedi failed them and led to their demise. This is not something I'm making up, but rather what George Lucas himself has said about the prequels, that they showed the failings of the Jedi. And if Luke hadn't loved and believed in his father, he would have never brought him back to the light. And if that didn't happen, there's no way Luke defeats Vader and the Emperor, and instead he's either killed or converted in that final encounter on the second Death Star. When you really think about it, family is what destroyed Anakin and allowed Vader to be born because the Jedi of old didn't allow it. And family is what brought Anakin back to the light and destroyed Vader because the Jedi of new, that being Luke, believed in it. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Do you think the future of Star Wars should be more gray, or are they going down the wrong path? Or am I wrong altogether and there isn't a big shift to the gray coming? Let me know what you think in the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. Also, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this and all things Star Wars to come. If you're already a subscriber, then thanks for your continued support. If you want to know when I upload new videos, then hit the notification button or just follow me on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching.